Episode 12, The Divided Town. Sabrina stood at the back of the town hall, the fragmented lens revealing layers of magical influence threading through the packed room. The familiar space had transformed into a battlefield of subtle energies. Spring Magic faction members dotted the crowd like bright points of green light through the lens, their magic weaving tendrils of fresh floral scents and gentle warmth through the air. She adjusted the lens's focus, watching Ivy's supporters direct these magical currents with practiced precision. What appeared to most attendees as natural spring breezes carried whispers of enchantment, designed to soften resistance and encourage receptiveness. The manipulation was masterful, so subtle that even experienced magic users might mistake it for seasonal change. Mayor Grange stepped up to the podium, her sharp gray suit a stark contrast to the pastel colors favored by faction members. Even from a distance, Sabrina noticed the tension in her shoulders, the slight strain around her eyes as she gripped the podium. "Citizens of Hallowville," the mayor began, "we're here to address the recent surge in magical disturbances. Disturbances?" A well-dressed woman shot up from her seat, her spring-green scarf floating dramatically in a non-existent breeze. "Is that what we're calling the destruction of my greenhouse?" Through the lens, Sabrina watched the woman's magic pulse outward, carrying images of shattered glass and withered plants. The display drew gasps from nearby attendees, though Sabrina noticed the damage seemed suspiciously precise, almost staged in its dramatic impact. "Mrs. Chen, please," Mayor Grange started, but the interruption had achieved its purpose. The crowd buzzed with worried whispers, their anxiety feeding the growing magical tension in the room. Ivy Larkspur rose from her front row seat with fluid grace. Through the lens, Sabrina watched the faction leader weave delicate enchantments into her very movement. Light seemed to catch in her green-gold hair, creating a subtle aurora effect that drew every eye in the room. It was masterfully done, natural enough to avoid detection, yet powerful enough to command attention. "If I may, Mayor Grange?" Ivy's voice carried perfectly, enhanced by magic that made it resonate with just the right harmonics to sound both authoritative and soothing. The mayor gestured her approval, looking relieved to step back from the podium. "Friends and neighbors," Ivy began, her presence expanding to fill the space. "We stand at a crossroads. Our beloved Hallowville has always been special, but now we have the opportunity to become extraordinary." The lens revealed coordinated pulses of magic from faction members throughout the crowd. Each pulse synchronized perfectly with Ivy's words, creating waves of agreement that rippled through the assembled residents. Sabrina watched Noah frown at his handheld scanner, clearly detecting the same patterns. "Think of our magical heritage like a garden," Ivy continued, conjuring a small illusion of sprouting flowers. "We've tended the same plot for generations, but gardens must grow and change. Clinging to Halloween magic alone is like..." She paused for effect, insisting on candlelight in an age of electricity. The metaphor landed with practiced precision, accompanied by another wave of magical reinforcement from her supporters. Sabrina saw heads nodding throughout the crowd, the coordinated enchantments making the argument feel natural and inevitable. Unable to stay silent any longer, Sabrina stepped forward. "If I may present some research about magical stability. Before she could reach the podium, one of her former students, young Timothy from her Tuesday night class, jumped up with a shout of delight. A burst of spring magic erupted from his hands, creating a shower of cherry blossoms that drifted through the air. "It just came to me," he exclaimed, his excitement seemingly genuine though the timing was suspect. The energy felt so natural. Two more students followed suit, their spontaneous and magical discoveries creating a display of spring growth that had the crowd murmuring in appreciation. Through the lens, Sabrina could see how their magic had been carefully primed, like instruments tuned to play on cue. The interruptions effectively derailed her attempt to present evidence, transforming what should have been a serious discussion about magical stability into a celebration of spring's emergence. Ivy stood at the podium, benevolently observing the displays with the satisfied smile of a conductor whose orchestra was performing perfectly. Noah caught Sabrina's eye from across the room, tapping his scanner meaningfully. The readings must have confirmed what she saw through the lens, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to sway public opinion. But proving that without revealing their surveillance methods would be nearly impossible. Sabrina gripped the fragmented lens tighter as Ivy glided to center stage, her movements liquid grace. Through the crystalline surface, Sabrina watched the faction leader begin weaving an intricate tapestry of magic and manipulation. These recent disturbances, Ivy said, gesturing to projected images of portal damage around town, aren't disasters, they're growing pains. Her magic flowed like spring water, threading through the harsh images. Where a portal had scarred the park's ground, delicate crocuses now bloomed in the projection. A collapsed wall became a trellis for morning glories. Nature doesn't fight change, Ivy continued, her voice honey-sweet. It embraces it. Through the lens, Sabrina watched the magical overlay transform every scene of destruction into a vision of springtime renewal. The crowd sighed appreciatively, their fears visibly melting as beauty replaced chaos. But Sabrina saw the truth. The damage remained beneath the illusion, masked but unresolved. Let's hear from those who've witnessed this transformation firsthand. Ivy beckoned to the front row. Mr. Harrison, you've been our groundskeeper for 40 years. The elderly man stood, his usual skepticism replaced by an unsettling enthusiasm. Through the lens, Sabrina saw threads of spring magic wrapped around him like silk ribbons, pulsing in time with his words. Quill's essence stirred in the potted plants near her feet, confirming her suspicions. This wasn't natural conviction. Never seen anything like it, Harrison declared, his voice carrying unnaturally well. The new growth, the vitality, it's like the town's coming alive for the first time. 3 more testimonials followed, each from respected community members whose sudden conversion carried weight. Each speaker radiated the same enchanted certainty, their words shaped by magic that the lens revealed in shimmering layers. Mayor Grange finally stepped forward, raising her hands for attention. While these experiences are compelling, we need to consider all aspects. Of course, Mayor, Ivy smoothly interrupted. Which is why we've prepared this. She produced a thick document with flourish. A petition signed by over 300 residents, calling for emergency action to protect our town. Sabrina watched the mayor's face tighten as she scanned the document. Through the lens, strings of spring magic wove through the paper itself, making the text seem to glow with authority. Our research team has documented 17 instances of Halloween magic instability this month alone, Ivy continued, projecting graphs that painted traditional magic as erratic and dangerous. Each data point pulsed with subtle enchantment, making the negative patterns seem more prominent. Sabrina felt her stomach clench as familiar faces in the crowd began nodding along. Even Mrs. Whitaker, who'd attended every Halloween festival for 50 years, looked troubled by the presentation. Through the lens, Sabrina watched Ivy's influence spread like pollen on a breeze. Some say we should maintain the old ways, Ivy said, her tone gentle but pointed. That balance matters more than safety. But is that wisdom speaking, or fear? She paused, letting the enchanted words sink in. Are we protecting tradition, or hiding behind it? The lens showed how each phrase carried carefully crafted spells, tiny seeds of doubt taking root in the minds of Sabrina's supporters. She saw Noah shift uncomfortably, his scanner probably going crazy with readings. A commotion near the back drew everyone's attention, right on cue, Sabrina noted bitterly. A small portal had manifested, spinning eerily in the corner. Before anyone could react, Ivy moved with practiced grace. Allow me to demonstrate a better way, she said, raising her hands. Spring magic flowed from her in a concentrated stream, wrapping around the portal like vines. Within moments, the disturbance settled into nothing more than a shimmer in the air. The crowd burst into applause. Through the lens, Sabrina saw the truth. The portal wasn't closed, merely suppressed. Its energy still churned beneath the surface, but the visual impact of Ivy's solution was undeniable. The council will need to review this petition, Mayor Grange announced, though her tone suggested the decision was already made. In the meantime, we'll conduct safety assessments of all Halloween magic practices within town limits. Sabrina didn't need the lens to see her defeat in this round. But through its crystal surface, she watched the town's magical aura begin to shift. The familiar orange-gold energy of Halloween magic dimmed while spring's green radiance grew stronger, spreading like ivy claiming new territory. Ivy caught her eye across the room and smiled, not unkindly, but with the satisfaction of a master strategist whose gambit had played out perfectly. Through the lens, Sabrina saw the truth of that smile, beautiful, dangerous, and absolutely certain of victory. Sabrina hurried through the historical society's dim corridors, following the soft glow of witchlight emanating from the restricted archives. Through the fragmented lens, she watched protective wards shimmer along the walls, their usual steady pulse now erratic and intense. She found Penny surrounded by floating orbs of golden light, her white hair adorned with tiny crystal butterflies that caught and scattered the magical illumination. Ancient tomes and scrolls hovered around her workstation, their pages rustling with residual enchantments.
Ah,
Perfect timing, Penny said without looking up. The wards have been absolutely chatty today. Come see what they've been telling me. Sabrina approached, holding up the lens. The magical barriers around certain shelves pulsed with heightened activity, their normally subtle protection now visibly straining. They're responding to the town's instability? Like canaries in a coal mine. Penny gathered her flowing sleeves and stood. But they've shown me something interesting. Follow me. They wound through towering shelves until reaching what appeared to be a solid wall. Penny's fingers traced intricate patterns in the air, each gesture triggering complex magical responses that Sabrina could see clearly through the lens. The wall shimmered and dissolved, revealing a hidden alcove. Few know about this section, Penny explained, ushering her inside. It houses records from other magical communities, their triumphs, their struggles, and sometimes. She paused meaningfully. Their falls. The small space hummed with preservation spells, maintaining delicate journals and documents that radiated centuries of magical resonance. Sabrina felt Quill's essence stirring through the potted plants stationed strategically around the room, their leaves trembling with recognition. As they began searching through the texts, a leather-bound journal caught Sabrina's attention, or rather, caught Quill's. The plants nearest to it began to pulse with an urgent energy. Through the lens, Sabrina saw powerful magic emanating from its tarnished silver clasps, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. That one, Penny breathed, reaching for it with careful hands. I've never seen the preservation spells react quite like this. She began a methodical process of breaking the magical seals, each one dissolving with a soft chime. The moment the final seal broke, spectral images rose from the pages like smoke, forming scenes that played out in the air before them. Through the lens, Sabrina watched a magnificent city take shape, graceful spires connected by bridges of pure light, gardens floating impossibly between buildings, and at its center, a structure that made her gasp. The architecture, she murmured, it's almost exactly like Hallowville's magical framework, Penny confirmed. This was the Twilight Vale. One of the greatest magical hubs in recorded history until its collapse. The journal's pages turned themselves, revealing elegant handwriting that seemed to catch the witchlight like fresh ink. Marcus Vale, Penny read, Master Archivist of the Twilight Vale. His accounts are considered the most complete record of the Vale's final days. Sabrina leaned closer, the lens revealing layers of magical script hidden between the conventional text. There's more here, encoded messages? Clever boy, Marcus was. Penny produced a crystal prism from her pocket. He knew certain details needed to be preserved, but safely hidden. Here, hold the lens at this angle. When combined with Penny's prism, the lens revealed the hidden text in full clarity. Sabrina read aloud, the movement gains influence daily. They speak of progress, of natural evolution toward pure spring magic. Their arguments seem reasonable to those who don't understand the necessity of balance. Keep reading, Penny encouraged, adjusting the prism slightly. They began with small changes, modifications to the protective wards, claiming the old ways were inefficient. Each alteration was presented as modernization, improvement. By the time we recognized the pattern, they had dismantled nearly half our core protections. The spectral images shifted, showing the same magnificent city now threaded with spreading cracks of magical instability. Through the lens, Sabrina could see how the Vale's magical infrastructure mirrored Hallowville's current systems with unsettling precision. "The fragmented lens is showing me something else," Sabrina said, adjusting its focus. "The way they altered the wards, it's exactly like the changes Ivy's faction is proposing." Penny nodded grimly. "History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes." Marcus knew that someday, another community might face the same threat. That's why he encoded these warnings. They continued decoding the hidden annotations, each revelation adding to a growing knot in Sabrina's stomach. The journal detailed how the movement had systematically weakened the Vale's protections while maintaining a facade of progress and inevitable change. Sabrina watched in fascination as Marcus Vale's journal projected another memory into the air. A town hall materialized, its architecture grander than Hallowville's, but the scene painfully familiar. Through the fragmented lens, she observed a charismatic speaker addressing the crowd, her gestures and magical aura eerily reminiscent of Ivy's recent presentations. "Noah needs to see this," Sabrina said, reaching for her phone. She paused the recording with a gentle wave of her hand and sent him a quick message. Noah arrived minutes later, his EMF detector humming. As the memory resumed playing, his equipment lit up. "These energy patterns," he said, frowning at the readings. "They match the subtle influence techniques Ivy used at last week's meeting. The resonance is almost identical." "She must have studied these records," Penny said, her crystal butterflies flickering with concern. The Vale Spring faction used the same methods, reasonable arguments wrapped in layers of magical persuasion. Sabrina turned the pages, the lens revealing hidden text between the lines. Her stomach tightened as she read passages describing orchestrated portal disturbances. "They deliberately triggered magical incidents," she said, then blamed the chaos on resistance to change. "Look at these diagrams, they detail exactly how to destabilize ley line intersections." Through the lens, she saw traces of Marcus's emotions preserved in the magical ink: frustration, fear, and growing desperation. The journal's pages seemed to vibrate with his mounting anxiety as entry after entry documented ignored warnings and dismissed concerns. "The magical measurements are the most troubling part," Penny said, directing their attention to a series of complex arithmetic calculations. "Noah, compare these to your recent readings." Noah pulled out his notebook, laying it beside the journal. His face paled as he aligned the figures. "The pressure buildup in Hallowville's ley lines, it's following the exact same pattern. Even the rate of increase matches." Sabrina felt Quill's essence stirring anxiously in the nearby plants as she uncovered more parallels. The Vale Spring faction had started with small changes, adjusting ward configurations, modifying traditional spells for efficiency, gradually shifting the magical balance toward their preferred resonance. "Here's where it really turned," she said, finding a passage that made her voice catch. The lens revealed layers of preserved memories showing former friends becoming adversaries. People who'd worked together for years suddenly supported restrictions on traditional magic use. Even the Vale's most respected practitioners began advocating for complete magical reformation. Noah's detector whirred as he scanned the spectral images. There are traces of compulsion magic woven through these memories. Subtle but pervasive, affecting hundreds of people simultaneously. Penny nodded grimly. Mass manipulation disguised as natural social change. The Vale Spring faction must have spent years laying the groundwork. As they reached the final entries, the journal trembled in Sabrina's hands. A brilliant light erupted from its pages, filling the alcove with a three-dimensional projection of the Twilight Vale's last days. Through the lens, Sabrina watched in horror as the city's magical network began to unravel. It started small, fluctuations in the protective wards, unexpected portal activity, gardens growing out of season. But the cascade of failures accelerated rapidly. Bridges of light flickered and failed. Buildings that had floated gracefully for centuries began to list and crack. The very air seemed to fracture as the magical pressure exceeded critical thresholds. "Stop," Noah said sharply, his detector screaming. "The magical resonance is reaching dangerous levels." Sabrina quickly closed the journal, but not before recognizing one final, chilling detail. The Vale's Spring faction had proposed the same word modifications that Ivy had presented at their last town meeting, changes that were scheduled for a vote next week. "We need to compare everything," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Every proposal, every incident, every spontaneous portal occurrence. If Ivy's following the Vale's playbook, then we're already further down this path than anyone realizes," Penny finished, her expression grave. "But now we have proof, and more importantly, we have warning." The plants around them shivered with Quill's essence, their leaves casting shadows that mimicked the Vale's final moments. Sabrina placed her hand on the journal, feeling the weight of Marcus Vale's desperate attempt to prevent history from repeating itself. "We need to be careful how we present this," Noah said, reviewing his readings. "If we move too quickly or too publicly, we could trigger the very crisis we're trying to prevent," Sabrina agreed. She held up the lens, watching magical currents swirl through the alcove. "But we can't wait too long." The Vale's collapse wasn't just about magic, it was about trust, community, and how quickly both can erode when people stop questioning what they're being told to believe. Sabrina leaned closer to the journal's weathered pages, her fingers hovering over the ancient parchment. A familiar tingle ran through her as Quill's essence gathered around the book's spine, condensing into a soft, pulsing glow. Through the fragmented lens, she watched in amazement as new text began to materialize between the existing lines, shimmering in alternating hues of autumn orange and spring green. "Look at this," she breathed, adjusting the lens to better capture the ethereal script. "There's an entire hidden narrative here." Penny moved closer, her crystal butterflies casting prismatic light across the revealed text. "The Equilibrium Crown," she read, her voice filled with wonder. "I've never seen any mention of this in our records." Sabrina studied the intricate diagrams appearing beneath the lens. The crown's design was beautiful in its complexity, delicate spirals of Halloween magic interwoven with spring energy, creating perfect symmetry. Unlike the crude attempts at magical fusion she'd seen before, this artifact had been crafted to embrace both seasonal powers equally. "It's meant to be a stabilizer," she said, tracing the flowing script with her finger. "Something that could maintain balance even when seasonal forces were in conflict." Noah's detection equipment suddenly chirped, the display lighting up with rapid readings. He held the medallion shard closer to the journal, and the device's hum intensified. "The magical signatures match," he said, showing Sabrina the overlapping wave patterns. "Whatever this crown is, it's connected to our medallion fragment." Quill's essence rippled through nearby plants, causing them to bend and twist. Sabrina watched as his seedlings began arranging themselves on the table, forming geometric patterns that matched symbols in the hidden text. "These aren't just coordinates," she realized, comparing the alignments. "They're part of a larger magical matrix." "The location's encoded," Penny said, pulling out a star chart. "See how the patterns shift with the lunar phases?" Classic protection magic, the information only reveals itself when all elements are in perfect balance. Sabrina's concentration was broken by a sharp magical pulse from the Historical Society's outer wards. Through the lens, she saw the alert sigils flaring to life. "Someone's coming," she warned, recognizing the distinctive magical signatures. "Members of the Spring faction." Penny moved swiftly to the ward control panel, her fingers dancing across the crystalline surface. "I'm activating the secondary barriers," she said. "That should buy us a few minutes." Sabrina turned back to the journal, heart racing as she tried to absorb as much information as possible. The hidden text was explicit about the crown's recovery requirements. It had to be claimed during the perfect convergence of seasonal energies, aligned with specific lunar phases. The lens revealed swirling warnings around these passages, showing violent magical backlash if the balance was disrupted during the retrieval. The timing has to be exact, she told Noah, who was quickly copying down the decoded coordinates. If someone tries this with corrupted or unbalanced magic. The wards pulsed again, more insistently this time. Through the lens, Sabrina could see the magical barriers rippling under increased pressure. Quill's seedlings trembled, their patterns becoming more urgent as they continued revealing the encoded information. Got it, Noah said, finishing his notes just as voices became audible in the corridor outside. The last set of coordinates and the lunar timing requirements. Penny's hands flew over the ward controls, strengthening the magical barriers. We need to move, she said, her usually cheerful voice tense. They're requesting access to this section for a routine inspection. Sabrina carefully closed the journal, making sure Quill's essence had fully retreated from its pages. The lens showed residual magical traces still swirling around the book, but they were fading quickly, returning to their dormant state. She gathered the seedlings, which had already begun rearranging themselves into a more natural configuration. The hidden text's warnings about the crown echoed in her mind as they quickly tidied the research area. The artifact's power was meant to restore harmony, but in the wrong hands, it could become a weapon of devastating proportions. The lens had shown her exactly what that kind of magical devastation looked like, and she wasn't about to let Hallowville suffer the same fate as the Vale. Sabrina watched as Quill's essence wove through the scattered research materials, causing specific phrases and symbols to glow with heightened significance. The magical patterns formed a complex web, connecting seemingly unrelated details about the crown's location. Through the fragmented lens, she observed how the illuminated text aligned with the natural ley line formations marked on their maps. Look at this convergence point, she whispered to Noah, tracing the glowing lines. The ancient grove we found last week, it's not just any magical nexus. During certain astronomical alignments, the ley lines there achieve perfect equilibrium. Noah spread out their expedition notes from the maze, comparing them with the new information. The route patterns we mapped, they're pointing to the same location. A gentle tap at the door made them all freeze. One of Sabrina's advanced students, Marcus, slipped inside, his face tight with concern. Miss Blackwood, there's trouble brewing. Ivy's people are spreading stories about the Historical Society harboring dangerous magical research. They're saying you're experimenting with forbidden seasonal manipulation. Sabrina's stomach clenched. Through the lens, she could see magical surveillance signatures hovering near the building's exterior, spring magic, precisely controlled and nearly invisible to normal detection. How bad is it? Council members are talking about implementing oversight procedures, Marcus said. They want to review all magical research conducted here. The journal pulsed beneath Sabrina's hands, drawing her attention back to its pages. The lens revealed new text materializing, a warning written in shifting seasonal magic. The crown responds only to those who have known true harmony between the seasons. One who has walked both paths, felt both powers as their own. Through nearby plants, Quill's essence showed her a series of rapid images, their shared experiences with both Halloween and spring magic, moments when they'd achieved perfect balance together. The message was clear, her unique connection with Quill had prepared her for this exact challenge. A sharp magical surge outside made the wards flicker. Penny moved to the windows, her expression grim. They're getting bolder with their surveillance. We need to move quickly. Sabrina gathered their notes while Noah copied the final coordinates. Her mind raced back to their exploration of the rooted maze, remembering how the pathways had shifted and merged. If they applied that knowledge to the grove's layout. Quill's essence flowed through a cluster of seedlings, arranging them into a miniature map. The pattern matched their maze notes perfectly, showing how the ancient paths would align during specific astronomical conditions. Through the lens, Sabrina saw the timing clearly. They had until the equinox, mere days away, before the magical balance would shift too far for the crown to be safely retrieved. If we wait, we lose our chance, she said, studying the projected timeline. The equinox will throw off the grove's natural equilibrium for months. Another surge hit the wards, stronger this time. Penny's crystals chimed in warning as magical pressure built outside. They're preparing for a formal inspection, Penny said, her hands moving quickly over the ward controls. I can trigger a cascade of minor magical anomalies, nothing dangerous, but enough to keep them busy for a few minutes. Sabrina nodded, carefully securing their findings in her enchanted satchel. The weight of the decision pressed against her chest, but Quill's essence showed her two distinct visions through the nearby plants, Hallowville thriving in perfect seasonal harmony, or torn apart by unchecked magical forces. The choice was stark and immediate. I have to go now, she told Noah, double-checking the coordinates. If we lose access to these records, or if the faction increases their interference. I'll coordinate with your students, Noah said, understanding in his eyes. Keep them watching for any suspicious movement around the grove. Marcus can help monitor the magical surveillance patterns. Penny's diversion sprang to life, small, controlled bursts of magical energy that would keep the faction's attention focused on the building's perimeter. Go, she urged Sabrina. I'll make sure they don't follow your magical signature. As Sabrina prepared to leave through a concealed side exit, Quill's essence gathered around her, reinforcing their shared purpose. The stakes were clear, Hallowville's future balanced on finding the crown before the equinox. She couldn't afford to wait or second guess. The time for caution had passed.